and this is a topic I know you guys have been talking about, is intentional beekeeping. I was wondering if you could explain to us what you mean by intentional beekeeping and a little bit about that subject.
Well, I think it's important, and obviously I'm still trying to figure out how to do that. Like, I've become much more quote unquote intentional in recent times. But so many of us, when we start beekeeping, we really don't know what we're doing, and we read books and we kind of have an idea, but we just don't know what we're doing. And so we want to try everything. And I'm still doing some of that. I want to try everything. And but I think what intentional beekeeping, kind of what it means to me, is that everything with you do with your bees needs to have a purpose. You need to be intentional about what you do. If you're just going in bees and throwing frames around and you're just looking at them just to observe and look, if you're learning from that, that's one thing. And if you have a purpose for doing it, that's one thing. But just to get in them because you feel like you need to get in them, that's not really intentional beekeeping. If you're just breaking out, you're breaking your hives way down, splitting a lot, and you really, you don't really know what you're doing, or you really don't need that many colonies, and you're not really intentional about what you're doing, you don't have a purpose for why you're doing it, then that's not really intentional beekeeping. And so many people kind of go into beekeeping, they read some books, and they may have a year or so of success, or 2 or 3 even, and they kind of think they've got everything figured out, and then they crash and burn. But through a lot of those lessons and those trials you go through, you do learn the things that work and the things that don't, and you can become more goal oriented and intentional in what you're doing. So I think kind of what intentional beekeeping means to me is that, Cayman Reynolds talks about great queens, dead mites, and proper nutrition. It kind of boils around those 3 things to me. Like, how are you doing that? What's your plan to maintain great queens, to maintain the right genetics? What is your plan to control the mites? I mean, whether it's you treat like crazy and you just don't worry about it, but you do need to kind of see, for example, assess your mite situation and know what the need is and how the treatments are working, effectiveness. If you're just treating for mites with oxalic acid vapor a couple times a year and you're not checking to see if it's working, that's not intentional beekeeping. You know what I mean? You need to check before, do whatever type of treatment you decide to use, and then check after you're done and see if it worked. Otherwise, you really don't know. You can feel comfort in your heart and peace in saying I treated, but then if all your bees die due to viruses spread by the mites and you don't have any idea why, maybe that particular treatment wasn't effective for you in your situation. Even with the mite control, even if it involves bringing in some VSH genetics or trying to figure out how to do that, if you're intentional on how you do it, you're raising better genetics and you're working on that. That's one thing. Same thing with food. If you're feeding your bees with a purpose, if you have reasons for doing it, then that's another reason, intentional beekeeping. But it's just a matter of really having goals and a purpose for what you're doing, and I like the word intentional about what you're doing. And I think you can kind of put intentional beekeeping in the same category as sustainable beekeeping. If you're intentional with what you're doing, you're going to be able to sustain the bees. You're going to be able to be successful and learn over time and reach your goals. And your intention will change over time. Like, you may start off just, hey, I want a couple of colonies. You fall in love with it and you end up being a commercial beekeeper someday. So the goals and the intentions can change with experience, but you got to have a reason for doing what you're doing.